oddly. Just waiting for TFR intro music to catch up. Still haven't got that time just quite perfect yet. For those who don't know, we're also on Truth Frequency Radio, iHeart, iTunes, and TalkStream Live. So that's why we do the breaks, and that's why I'm talking about the other stuff that you probably can't see on YouTube. Hopefully my mic is live on YouTube tonight. Hello, and welcome to Comrades and Farms here on Truth Frequency Radio, iHeart, iTunes, TalkStream Live, and also available on the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel. That's Farmacy, F-A-R-M-A-C-Y, as in let food be thy medicine. Oh boy, tonight we're going to go into a little bit on bacteria and how that affects rain, and we're going to go into seed harvest and seed saving, and we're going to go into cover crops and different tactics for planting and successing cover crops and different inoculants and nutritional drenches and all that sort of stuff. So first off, I just wanted to say welcome to everyone who's here on the YouTube live chat. Much appreciated. And also to anyone who's over here in TFR. I'm just going to have a look at the TFR chat. Don't see any activity over there. Seems like the Tuesday night is a little quiet in TFR chat. Anyway, thank you guys for coming in and supporting the channel. I appreciate it. And I'll just say hello to everybody here that I see in the chat. Looks like YTFP Chris, Mo Homesteading, Justin Good Earth, and Geeky Gardens are all here. So thank you guys for joining and watching. Let's see. I'm going to start with an article tonight that I found, and I actually came across this from listening to a podcast from John Kempf, and now I can't remember the name of the podcast, but maybe I'll dig it up later and share it. But I want to read this article to you because it's really interesting about how rain helps bacteria form and how ice crystals form and all sorts of interesting stuff. So first off, let's just jump into this. This is an article I found on hardydiagnostics.com, and I guess what I'll do here is share a link over here for the YouTube viewers just so you guys can read along if you choose to or like to. That way you can see how bad I'm reading this live. Alright, so the article is called Microbial Showers, the Rain-Making Bacteria. During a cloudburst, we often say it's raining cats and dogs. In reality, it's actually raining bacteria, a natural phenomenon that presents no cause for alarm. The sky, once thought of as a sterile void, is actually teeming with bacteria which are vital for watering the plants below. Biological precipitation, or bioprecipitation cycle, as it is called, starts when the bacteria form colonies on the surface of plants. Winds will then sweep the bacteria into the atmosphere, and ice crystals form around them. Water molecules clump onto the crystals, making them bigger and bigger. The ice crystals turn into rain or snow and fall to the ground. When precipitation occurs, the bacteria have the opportunity to make it back down to the ground. If even one bacterium lands on a plant, it can multiply and form colonies, thus causing the cycle to repeat itself over and over. Nuclei are the seeds around which ice is formed. Snow and most rain begin with the formation of ice and clouds. Dust and soot can also serve as ice nuclei. But biological ice nuclei are different from dust and soot nuclei because only these biological nuclei can cause freezing at warmer temperatures. Recent discoveries show that rain-making bacteria are more efficient at forming these nuclei than inert particles due to their larger size and surface area. Minerals can only orient a few water molecules, but bacteria proteins are big and can orient many simultaneously. Ski resorts exploit this property by using attenuated bacteria for the seeding of artificial snow. The older method of seeding clouds with silver iodide has been used for over 60 years. Most research to date involves the ability of Pseudomonas syringae to serve as nuclei in the promotion of ice crystals. Ice-minus bacteria is a nickname given to the variant of this microorganism. This strain of P. syringae lacks the ability to produce a certain surface protein, usually found in a wild-type ice plus P. syringae. The ice plus protein, INA protein, ice nucleation active protein, found on the outer bacterial cell wall, acts as the nucleating centers for ice crystals. This facilitates ice formation, hence the designation ice plus. The ice minus variant of P. syringae is a mutant lacking the gene responsible for ice nucleating surface protein production. This lack of surface protein provides a less favorable environment for ice formation. Both strains of P. syringae occur naturally, but recombinant DNA technology has allowed for the synthetic removal or alteration of specific genes, enabling the creation of the ice minus strain. The introduction of an ice minus strain of P. syringae to the surface of plants causes competition between the strains. Should the ice minus strain win out, the ice nucleate provided by the wild type P. syringae would no longer be present, thus lowering the level of frost development on plant surfaces at normal water freezing temperatures. Everyone knows that water freezes at 0 C. However, few people know that ultra pure water without nuclei forming particles freezes at -40 C. The ice-forming bacteria increase the temperature at which ice crystals form, thus wreaking havoc for farmers when tender leaves are destroyed by a coating of ice. In the United States alone, it has been estimated that frost accounts for approximately $1 billion in crop damage each year. As P. syringae commonly inhabits plant surfaces, its ice nucleating nature incites frost development at warmer temperatures than 0 C, freezing the buds of the plant and destroying the crop. Pseudomonas syringae is not the only ice nucleator, but is the most common, and all varieties share a common cell wall protein structure that serves as a scaffold for free-floating water molecules. The discovery of bioprecipitation has many far-reaching implications. For example, a reduced amount of bacteria on crops could affect the climate. Because of the bioprecipitation, cycle overgrazing in a dry year could actually decrease rainfall, which could then make the next year even drier. And we'll talk about that after I read this. Rain-making bacteria have been found around the globe, even in Antarctica. Previous work has shown that Brent Christopher, a researcher from Louisiana State University, it is possible that cloud-borne microbes could turn on their ice nuclear proteins in the atmosphere and subsequently be returned to the ground in snow or rain. This is a very exciting possibility that further research could unearth. This discovery reminds us once again the importance of our microbes in our environment, even in the sky above us. Jay Hardy, CLS SM ASCP, Santa Maria, California. So I just wanted to share that article because I know John Kempf had mentioned how the certain types of bacteria can actually help form rain, and I kind of wanted to follow up on that thought. He just mentioned it in passing, but it caught my attention that, hey, that's another thing that we haven't really studied all that closely. And then I found that article and I thought that was really interesting, so I thought it would share it with the audience here. Just one sec here. All right, had to clear my throat. Didn't want to blow your eardrums. Anyway, so I thought that was an interesting article. I'm just going to go back and catch up on the YouTube chat here, make sure I haven't missed any questions or important comments. It doesn't look like I have. So I was going to talk a little bit more about the environment. I know from the permaculture courses that I've studied fortunately through YouTube, they talk about desert environments and they talk about rain-forming environments, and there's really a delicate balance there. When you get good trees and good vegetation on top of soil, there's a lot more moisture available for the atmosphere to take up and to produce rain. So you can actually dramatically affect rainfall by producing good microclimates that help support moisture ending up in the air. And now of course we find that it ties in even to bacteria helping form those moisture droplets in the air. So just something to pay attention to. Again, study and mimic nature, and while we're on this massive mission to try and explore space and conquer Mars and all that, it's interesting that we haven't really finished exploring this planet. We're finding 18,000 new species a year, I think, on this planet that are being discovered. So we have a lot more to go here. Let's see. So I have a question here from Geeky Gardens. So I've got 300 gallons of bacteria in my yard, huh? Geeky catches rainwater. Yeah, you probably do, Geeky. And I have, as much as I've studied water in depth, pardon the pun, or looked at water closely and all the different eccentricities of water, I had not heard about the part where it actually it goes to -40 before it freezes without the bacteria in it. So that's very interesting. That's another thing I'll want to follow up on. I'm on a lifelong journey, I think, to study and understand water better. It's a really interesting topic, and the more I study it, the more I find out about it, and the more questions I end up having. It's really interesting. If you've not seen Dr. Masaru Emoto, The Memory of Water, I recommend you go check out that documentary. That is very interesting. There is also a man named, what's his name? Gerald. Boy, I can't remember his last name off the top of my head right now. Anyway, Easy Water, EZ, as in the letters Easy Water. If you look up Easy, Dr. Gerald Pollack, that's his name, Dr. Gerald Pollack, and he's done studies on water, especially regarding hydrophobic and hygroscopic water surfaces, and how certain types of water form in very thin layers next to hygroscopic surfaces. And come to find out that water has some very special properties as well. So he's done some interesting research, and I know John Kempf had him on Advancing Eco-Agriculture's webinar or podcast. That was an excellent interview and discussion. I highly recommend you check that out. And then there's so much other information about water. Also, if you're not familiar with who Victor Schauberger was, check out Victor Schauberger. There's an excellent documentary on him and how he grew up in Austria studying the rivers there, and he actually helped make one of the most efficient methods for transferring big logs down streams using special water control flow, basically using the concept of water spiraling and vortexing. Even in mountainous river streams, it actually spirals and vortexes and flows a certain way. A lot more three-dimensionally than we picture it as when we see a river and look at it and we think it's this flat flowing water surface. It's actually a three-dimensional spiraling water surface. Really fascinating stuff. So those are just a few things to check out if you're interested in water and you think water is boring. Go look into some of those, because you'll find water is not boring at all. Let's see. Geeky Garden says, water is pretty much the basis of everything, isn't it? Yeah, it is, Geeky. It is. And I tell you what, after I saw that documentary on the memory of water from Dr. Masaru Emoto, I got thinking about all the moisture that's in the air, all the moisture that's in the food that we eat, and realizing that, that water has a specific charge to it. That's mind-blowing stuff when you really think about the implications of what his research has discovered so far. Justin Goodearth says, just saw him on a documentary on the Fifth Kind channel. Oh, interesting. Is that TV or Netflix or what? I'm out of the loop on most of that kind of stuff these days. Love the focus on Victor. Well, the one from YT, Chris. And I'm just going to go over here and check on the TFR chat, make sure I'm not missing anybody over there. Nope, fairly quiet over there, so that's good. I don't know, does anyone have any questions thus far about anything I've discussed or talked about? Or any questions regarding anything else? Because if not, then I think I'm going to move on to some other stuff. Looks like that's a negative. Just one sec here. Alrighty. Well, that looks like that's that. So I guess I'm going to go on to what's going on here on the farm. For those who don't know, I have a small homestead set up here. I have about 2 acres electric fenced or mostly electric fence. It needs to be some repairs to be done. That's on the list for this fall. So I think it's like 2.62 acres all total. It's contained in the fence zone. Of that, I run crop production in about 20,000 square feet of that. And this year I just started working on getting cover crops down a little bit better. And I've done some cover cropping, a little bit of buckwheat mostly, and combinations of buckwheat and corn and squash, the three sisters, as well as some beans. But this year, with the whole COVID thing, and I usually sell to a few local restaurants, and I kind of saw what was going on in early spring and kind of pulled back out of planting with the concept of production in mind, and instead switched to basically more cover cropping focused stuff. I figured I would make this a learning season for me, given COVID times. So I did that, and I've planted a lot of buckwheat this year, and now I'm experimenting with some rye and also some Austrian Winter Pea. I have not grown rye before in the past, but I did a tremendous amount of reading on it back in the spring and over the summer, and I've talked with several different farmers that I know who have used rye as cover cropping. And actually, the Austrian Winter Pea was suggested to me by my friend Brad of Grow the Farm Up YouTube channel. At some point, he's agreed to come on as a guest here, but he's busy harvesting hybrid and organic seed corn. His family and farm has one of the few remaining seed processing facilities left in the country that is independent. If you have not seen that video of his seed processing facility, he just put it up about a week ago. You should go check it out. The channel, again, on YouTube is Grow the Farm Up. And Brad Lefebvre, I think, if I'm pronouncing the last name correctly. Anyway, excellent channel, excellent man. He really understands plant health and nutrition and soil health. And he's one of the few last standing people who isn't under a huge conglomerate for seed production. And it's really refreshing to see. Hello, Cecilia. See you just came into the chat here on YouTube. Welcome. Glad you made it over to check out the stream here. Thank you, Geeky, for sharing those links. I'll have to go back and take a look at that Fifth Kind YouTube channel because I'm not familiar with that. So thank you for sharing that, Justin and Geeky also. Where was I going? Brad at Grow the Farm Up. Go check that video out. That is fantastic. Very nice facility. He's got quite a large investment to build a facility like that. For those who don't know, it's a lot of steel and concrete and machinery and conveyors and down the list. And he's out in Nebraska. So I'm going to go back to, let's see, so cover cropping here. This year I have about 17,700 square feet in cover crop now. Other years I have not put that much cover crop in, and I've rarely put cover crop in over the winter. If anything, I would scrape up mulch from the forest or by mowing and collecting it with a thatch rake, and then I would spread that on my blocks to keep them covered throughout the winter. But in my strive to try and improve my growing practices and improve my soil building health and speed and efficacy, I've started using more and more cover cropping, and this year I decided to add the rye and the Austrian Winter Pea to that, so I'd have something that's overwintering, building soil structure, sequestering carbon, charging those microbes and putting exudates into the soil to supply the biology with nutrition. And you'd be amazed, even at really cold temperatures, how active biology can actually be in the soil. The air temperature can be negative 20 degrees, but if that soil is still 40 degrees a couple of feet down, those organisms can be working down there. So that's really interesting. The Austrian Winter Pea is supposed to be super hardy, so I'm looking forward to maintaining the legume as a cover crop, fixing nitrogen right through the winter. Brad also has a video of that on his channel. I believe he filmed a shot February 10th of this last year where he had where he showed the Austrian Winter Pea still green and growing in his cornfields, and he's had tremendous success with that as a cover crop. So this year I've done some experiments with different methods. Roll and seed, where I just roll down the buckwheat that was planted there as the previous cover crop, roll it down, seed it with rye, let it germinate and grow in. And then there's other areas where I've done till and drill. Primary reason for till and drill is because the Austrian winter pea, in order to have good wintering over capabilities, should be planted at a depth of 2 to 3 inches. So in order to achieve that, the easiest way for me to do that on large square footage areas without planting rows and rows of peas by hand is to go through and just drill it with a tiller. So I go through with the broadcast seeder and broadcast seed the rye and the Austrian winter pea in place, and then I come back with the tiller and I till to about 3 inches in depth, and then I come back with the mower. I drop the mower deck down on low. That excuse me, that lets me grade it nice and flat, and then I come back with a roller and press it in. And then after this rain that we're getting right now, I'll go back out there with inoculants and nutritional supplements to give it an extra boost to get it really going, and to make sure that the biology that helps fix nitrogen and does all those other soil and air and biological processes and exchanges between plants and soil is there, present, in and on the seed and in and on the soil, because that's really important. Now I see I have a question here from Cecilia Jansen. I had a question about how long and how to get your soil to be organic. Could you elaborate on the question, Cecilia? Are you asking about for organic certification, or are you asking about how to build organic matter in the soil? Welcome, Chris Jarvis. Welcome, Nessie Monster. Thank you guys for coming in. Good to see you. Geeky Garden says, watched a video on another channel earlier, and one of the ads was for cover crop seed provider. You may be messing with the YT algorithm. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, Geeky, because since I started talking about cover crops, all of a sudden, like every third ad I get on YouTube is for cover crops, trying to get me to buy cover crops from a seed company. I already have my seed company in mind. I usually go to the local Agway here for most of my seed, just because it's local. I don't have to pay the shipping on it, because that can be a huge cost when you're ordering 50-pound bags of seed. So I usually just go to the Agway, but in the future excuse me, in the future I'm going to be going to greencoverseed.com, I think, at least for some of the stuff, at least for the lighter seed that I can do, because I know Brad works with them, and their seed stock is very high quality, and their seed age is very low, because they do a very high rotation rate. So you're not getting old seed, and you're getting high quality, high nutrient dense seed. And we're going to get into that a little bit later in this discussion, because the nutrient density of the seed and the quality of the seed is so tremendously important for the total capability of the crop that you're growing and how well that gene expresses itself. And you can actually improve the quality of seed over time by growing it in good soils and with good health, and paying close attention to trace mineral nutrition. And you can actually decrease seed quality by going the other direction and growing in poor soils and not letting seed fill correctly. And it goes back to many of these other things that I've talked about here before, about trace mineral nutrition and supporting enzyme and good hormone function in plants, animals, and humans, and all that sort of stuff. So I'm going to go back to Cecilia's question here. For organic certification, she says, someone on my Facebook page got some lamb, but it was done with chemicals, and then want to make it organic. Will it be needed with the soil? Do you need to remove it or just build on it, and can a certain crop fix it? Excellent question, Cecilia. Organic certification, all you got to do is wait 3 years. Excuse me. You wait 3 years, and then you can go and get organic certified. There is a pretty hefty fee to become certified organic, and I guess the question is, are you getting certified organic for marketing reasons, or are you getting certified organic because you want healthy soils? Because that organic certification, given that it only requires 3 years, is really not a great metric. Now, that said, regarding fixing the soil, I don't want to focus on the negative side of things here. I want to focus on how we can improve things. Yes, there are many crops you can do, and the more you can do toward diversity the better off you're going to be. And also biology. Biology is critical. Biology is the trump card in soils. And I just got to check the time here because I think we're coming up on the break fairly soon here. I just don't want to overshoot it. Yeah, it looks like we got about a minute left. So the biology is very critical, and there is actually a product from Advancing Eco Agriculture called OP8. The letters OP, Oscar Papa 8, and I know that's used to help mitigate some pesticide residues in soils. The big thing though is get the plants growing healthily and sequestering carbon, and that helps foster that biological community. Keep inoculating that biological community. Keep making sure that's there, and then foster and supply a good environment. By good environment, I mean as much diversity as you can do. But we can talk about cover crops, and actually I kind of want to go into some of the cover crops that I'm doing and why I'm doing tonight. So we'll pick up with your questions after the break. If you want to stick around, I'm glad to discuss that more and at length and in depth if you like. That said, I think we're just about at the break here. Looks like, yeah, there we are. We're at it. So I will see you guys on the other side of the break. And is the show Comrades and Farms, streamed on Truth Frequency Radio, iTalk, iHeart, and TalkStream Live, as well as the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel. That's Farmacy, as in Let Food Be Thy Medicine. Before the break, we were discussing soils and recovering soils. We had a question from Cecilia Jansen specifically about recovering soils that have been worked in pesticide-type farming systems for a person who wants to switch back and go organic. So I want to go back to her question a little bit. I know she was asking about what crops specifically I would grow. Well, let's see. I would start with something simple, like really easy one to work with. It's really fast, and you can use it either as a green manure or you can use it as a longer cover crop if you want to have mulch material on top of the soil over the winter. There are some basic practices and principles you should be employing. And if you're already familiar, I apologize, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. You want to try and keep a cover layer on the soil, whether it's a mulch cover layer or a growing crop cover layer. You don't want sunlight striking soil directly. What we're trying to do is protect soil moisture and soil microbes and prevent the top of that soil from oxidizing. Here on my channel, I've got a couple of different videos about a closer look at soils and mulches. It's a series of 3, and I talk about using soils and mulches and how they act in natural systems. And I also talk about the 5 different spheres of the soil. So if you haven't seen that, you should check that out. That's some good information, a little bit more about the details of some of those pieces. That said, buckwheat's a good one. Rye and a winter pea of any type. Anything you can do to be capturing nitrogen from the air into the soil will help tremendously. Oftentimes we find a lot of commercial farms are putting chemical forms of nitrogen on when they could be fixing it straight from the air with the right biology and the right plants present. And if you think about it, the air is like 78% nitrogen. So 78% of the air in that column going all the way up to where the atmosphere fades away to basically no air is nitrogen. So all you got to do is convert it. So that's a big factor. And then I would say the type of plant you use, the better diversity you can get, the better. I know Gabe Brown talks about his ideal species group is some 9 different species. I think he uses a brassica and a couple of different clovers, and I think some rye, and I forget, there's a few others in there, but check out Gabe Brown and his talks on using cover cropping in regenerative agriculture. He's had some tremendous success, and I think he's up in North Dakota. Their whole growing season is like 80 days of frost-free weather. It's a really short season, and he's making some amazing things happen in that 80 or 90-day season that he has to actually grow crops. Now, of course, you can grow cover crops outside of that warm season. When you go into the wintertime, you want a hardier crop, something biennial or something that's cold hardy. In my case, I have 3 different crops in test this year for cold hardy. I'm running sweet clover in a couple of different blocks. Those are started back earlier in the season. Sweet clover should be planted about 6 weeks prior to first frost, so it has a chance to get established. It's a biennial plant, and that means that basically it will sprout. It'll grow some vegetation this year, and then the top of the plant will die back, but the root will still be alive underneath. And in the spring, that root will sprout back and grow up to 6 feet tall and build tremendous biomass and provide lots of pollen and nectar for honeybees. It's one of the highest pollen and nectar producers. So that's one that I'm growing. Rye is another one. The reason I'm using rye is because it has an allelopathic effect in the soil. That allelopathic effect, for people who are not familiar, is basically it prevents other seeds and plants from germinating or growing around it. It puts out a certain toxin, a rhizotoxin, that stops other plants from growing around it. So it's a great way to suppress weeds. And then at the end of its growing cycle, it's also a cold hardy plant. So we plant that in the fall. I just finished planting about 10,000 square feet of rye this last couple days, and so that'll sprout, it'll grow off, it'll kind of look like it's died back over the winter also, and then in the spring it'll grow back out again, and it'll come out to, it would normally go to flower around May, and then I think by June or maybe early July it would have gone to seed, and you'd have the cereal rye seed again. But my plan is to catch it just as it begins to go to flower. I understand that's the best time to make a kill back attempt on it, and I either want to roll it down or mow it down or roll and chop it down. And basically in doing that, I'm growing my mulch right in place. So I'm growing this rye crop, I chop and roll it down. Now it's going to cover the soil. It's killed out all the weeds. The rye root structure is this really feathery, wide root structure, so it really flocculates soil nice. It really opens the soil up and makes it feathery and helps get that aggregate going, which makes space for microbes and airflow and water and nutrient flow to happen in those little gaps in between those crumb structures, those aggregates. So basically I'll be able to roll that down as a mat, and now it'll act as a mulch so that I can get my new crop established relatively weed free. And then the other one I'm using is Austrian Winter Pea, and I think I talked about that a little bit before, but that's basically a legume. It's a nitrogen fixer, and so that will help supply nitrogen to the soil, and it'll be able to do that even throughout the winter. Same kind of thing. It'll kind of hang out in the winter when it's too cold to grow, and it'll just start growing again in the spring when it gets that warmth back again. So let me just roll back here and catch up on the chat. I have a question here from YTFP Chris. Do you have any dehydrators, farm? I do. I have two. One is a 160 liter dehydrator from Cabela's. I got that a number of years back. That is an excellent tool. It's got a 24-hour timer on it, and temperature controls, I think, anywhere from 40 or 50 degrees up to 140 or 160. I think it goes to 160 degrees. That's great for dehydrating all sorts of stuff. It's got lots of racks in it and all. I use that a lot. Previous years when I had much higher production of produce, I dehydrated a lot of stuff. That's a really nice way to preserve and store stuff. It makes it very small. Like for jalapeno peppers, I think for every pound of jalapeno peppers you dehydrate, it's about 1/12 of a pound of dehydrated material, and they reconstitute almost like they were fresh, so that's really nice. The downside of that dehydrator is it takes 16 amps 24 hours a day to dehydrate a cycle, and some crops like peppers, tomatoes, and some of the wetter crops like that take more than a day. Most of them will take 2 days to really, or even 3, to really get dried down, so it's a tremendous power hog. The other thing I have is a Baker's cooling rack that I picked up from a friend. That's in the greenhouse now, and I've set that up with some screens to help keep mice out and that sort of thing. I need to continue to upgrade that. I need to add some more screens and controls. Eventually what I would like to do is hook that to the thermal mass system in the greenhouse, put an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi on it, and let that control the temperatures and airflow in that, and basically make that a dehydrator, but run it off of the wood stove and solar power, so we don't have that huge electrical cost, and so that we're not grid dependent. A big part of my process here, amongst all of my research and learning and adventures here on the farm with all different technologies and tactics and techniques, is just trying to stay grid independent and being ready for that supply chain snap. And for the last 20 some years, a lot of people have made fun of me about that, and they're kidding in good humor. They mean well in their kidding, but it's kind of funny how this year all of a sudden there was a huge supply chain snap, and you couldn't get toilet paper, you couldn't get pasta, there's all this food that you couldn't get. And it's like, well, yeah, that's why I'm always trying to prepare for that, because I realize in my head just how fragile that whole system really is, and how many things have to line up in order for that to happen. And boy, if you don't believe that, go check out a Canadian beekeeper's blog, or Grow the Farm Up, one of these big farms who's really doing it on a big scale. Man, all it takes is a little bit for one of those big machines not to work. You can't get fuel for it. You can't have an employee in because there's a virus. All kinds of little things like that can throw huge chinks in the gears, and suddenly now you can't get things that you were counting on So it's nice to have the independent ability, not necessarily have to be independent all the time, but be capable of doing so and ready to make that switch at a moment's notice, because it's not something you can prepare for, at the last minute. You need to be prepared way in advance and have the tools and the pieces you need in place to be ready to handle that switch. All right, so I'm going to roll back into the chat here again quick. See if I missed anything here from anybody in the YouTube chat. Geeky Garden says, I've got a cheap kitchen dehydrator, but I can also dry herbs and such hanging above the lights in my lab. Oh yeah, that's another thing I do a lot of. In fact, I just put a video up today. In fact, YTFP watched it with me on the premiere of drying herbs in my greenhouse. I do a lot of drying in there, both in the rack and right just in the greenhouse. This time of year, I've already moved in a lot of the potted plants that are more sensitive, like ginger, turmeric, rosemary, holy basil, Texas tarragon. I have all these like herbal type plants that are not really cold hardy for our environment, so I move them in, and so I'm doing like a combination of drying stuff in there and also keeping those plants at a nice comfort level. It's really nice to go into that greenhouse. Like last night I harvested holy basil seed and sweet Thai basil seed, and they're hanging up in there drying, so you walk in there and you just smell this overpowering smell of holy basil and sweet Thai basil. So that's a really wonderful thing. And YTFP says, wish freeze drying was more economical, would be a nice tool. Yeah, it would. You probably could rig something up to make that more economical, but is it really worthwhile? Because, well, yeah, I hear you, YT. I hear you. I know there's around here, there's a company, not a company, but like an organization, I think it's called Farm to Table, that actually, if you're a local farmer, you can actually get there's a mobile processing facility, and I'm pretty sure they have freeze drying on board that processing facility. So you could take like a sweet corn crop like I have here, process it, freeze dry it, stick it in a freezer, or process it and speed freeze it, flash freeze it, stick it in a freezer and save it to winter time and get a higher price for it. I'm not really set up for anything at that scale yet, but it's a cool option to have, and it's cool that they have the flash freeze on board. I don't know about the freeze drying. It's probably a little more intensive energetically. Let's see. Cecilia Jensen has a question here. How long will it take to fix the soil if they use OP8 and do the cover crop chop and drop? Well, that's sort of a hard metric to describe. I would say it's going to take a few years to really get soil health going back the other direction. But it really depends. The big factors are getting that biology in there and getting that cover crop diversity up. I would say do at least 9 species. If you can cram it in there, cram 12. Get all different root structure types and plant guild types in there, and in that way you're providing every sort of biology and every sort of enzymatic function that you can possibly provide to help break those products down. That said, most of these pesticides and herbicides and fungicides are endocrine disruptors, and they're very resistant to breaking down. For example, glyphosate, I'm sure you know what the other name for that product is. If you don't, it won't be hard to look up on Google. Glyphosate has a half-life of 22 years. So that means if someone put an ounce on this year on that piece of soil, in 22 years, there's still a half an ounce of that residue there. And 22 years later, there's still a quarter ounce there. And 22 years later, there's still an eighth ounce there. So you get my drift that these are very persistent, long-term things. The thing I would do is go back and do the research and find out what pesticides were put on, or better yet, get an actual soil test done to find out exactly what pesticides are there and try and address those specific toxins as best you can. Each pesticide, herbicide, fungicide has a different function, a different way it works, a different chemical structure, that kind of thing. So I would say try and target specifically what you're trying to kill out. But Cecilia, definitely call Advancing Eco Agriculture. Tell them I sent you, and tell them you're looking to remediate soil, or tell your friends to do this. They're looking to remediate pesticides in soil, and find out as much information as you can about the specific pesticides that were used there, because obviously then you can dial in and use more specific tactics to address those particular toxins in the soil. It is doable. You can revitalize the soil, and biology and species diversity are your two biggest trump cards. The next one I would say, in combination with that, if you're doing those cover crops, I would say a big powerful tool you can use with that is something called foliar feeds. If you don't know what foliar feeds are, my last episode of Comrades and Farms, episode 6, we talked about foliar feeds at length, in depth, so much so that Geeky Gardens cleared out his bar drinking to the term foliar feed. Right, Geeky? Let's have a question here from YTFP Chris. If you grow crops to recondition the soil, do you have to remove the crop and take it off site as to not reintroduce what you're trying to remove from the soil? No, you don't, because what you're basically doing is breaking those compounds down. It might be a good idea to do that, and I know, while we're on this topic, I know there has been some experimentation done using magnetically charged water, vortex and magnetically charged water, and spraying that on soils that are contaminated. And what they found was that magnetically charged water chelated the chemicals. And the problem with that was that instead of just chelating the chemicals, it chelates the chemicals and takes them further into the soil profile. So if you're growing a shallow rooted crop, that might be beneficial, but if you're growing deeper rooted crops, the chemical's still there. So I think that's probably not the best approach. I think the best approach is to get the biology going in that soil, and the more diversity in biology you can get going in that soil, the faster the biology can remediate it. There's a field in the back of this farm here where I am that was sprayed with atrazine some 35 or maybe even close to 40 years ago now, and they completely killed the field. They way overdid it, and it was dead for a long time. And even like 15 or 20 years ago, when I first started coming to this farm to visit my friend here, it was just like you go out there in the middle of that field, everything else on this property is green. You'd walk out in that field in the summertime and it'd be yellow, just so dead, so lackluster of life. And in the last 10 or 15 years, since the rose bushes and all the wild biology has kind of filled into that field and started growing, it's back to growing at a much faster rate. It's much healthier than it was. So a lot can really be done with that diversity in biology for tools. And then the foliar feeds can really accelerate the photosynthetic abilities of the plant. And also, don't forget, that's a great way to apply that biology to get it right in and on the phytoplane, the leaf surface, and that has its own whole set of functionalities, capabilities, and enhancements for plant health. So I would say combine those three as your main approach, and then if you can find out specifically what the chemicals are that are residual in that soil, try to address those specifically as well. Some are more addressable than others. Anyway, so I hope that answers your questions on that sort of thing. And I want to go into cover crop. Well, no, I kind of went into cover crops. I definitely want to go into seed quality later in this episode, but I want to make sure that we get past the break here. It looks like we got about 7 minutes left here, so I guess we'll fill that in with a little chit chat. Trying to think what else I can offer as advice for the cover crop thing, or for soil remediation. Off the top of my head, that's about it. I hope that's helpful for you, Cecilia. And YTFP says, awesome answer. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. So let's see, there was something else I wanted to talk about, and I'm trying to think what it was off the top of my head now. And didn't get it back into the show notes when I was thinking about it. So let me just check over here on the TFR chat, make sure I'm not missing anybody on the TFR chat. Geeky Garden sharing the link. Thanks, Geeky. And hello, Rio. And hello, Free Energy 13. How are you guys over in TFR? I don't mean to ignore you guys. Glad to see you over here, and glad to see your participation. Geeky, thank you for sharing the links. Greatly appreciate that as well. And so let's see. So Cecilia Jansen says, yes, it is helpful. I will give the information, your link, your video if they need more advice. All right, very good. Thank you, Cecilia. And yeah, hope we can keep correcting more and more soils and building up the health of our environment and the people that interact with it. I have a question here from YTFP Chris. What about introducing mycelium? Yes, in that inoculant set. I guess I should address specifically what inoculants I use here. And these are good broad spectrum inoculants that cover the rhizobacters and a bunch of other different groups of microbes for soils, in soils, that interact with plants and that also work well on the phytoplane or the leaf surface for capturing nutrition, especially nitrogen straight out of the air. So as far as mycelium, yeah, it's never a bad idea to introduce mycelium. It's never a bad idea to improve the total fungal capability of the soil. At the end of the day, it really comes back to that soil carbon buildup comes back to mycelium, comes back to fungi, because fungi basically are like the long-term digesters in soil. They'll sit there and digest and redigest something in the soil until they cannot digest it anymore. And what they found is that when they get to that point, what's left is about 38 to 42% fat in the form of lipophilic acid. And so that's part of why that stays in the soil so well. And that humic matter, John Kempf has a great talk on humans, HUMINS, humans. That humic matter has an incredible ability to sequester nutrients and then release them in a slow rate. And it's a lot deeper than that. I think his talk is like an hour long, and it's specifically on humans, what they do in soils, how they're extracted and used in the industry, where they come from. He goes into excellent detail on humans, and that's really an important part. But in short answer to your question, yes, mycelium is good. One of the inoculants I use is called BioCoat Gold. That has a whole range of fungi in it. And it's amazing, areas I've inoculated, once they've been mulched, when I come back, you'll see little mushrooms coming up in them, like within a month or two, actually. It's amazing how fast those mycelial networks, some of them can just explode right into the soil. Some are a little bit longer. The question here from Justin Goodearth, what do you add as a mycology to your soil food web? Oh, yeah, that's what it is. BioCoat Gold is the one I use. It's I think there's also bacterial in that, but I know there's a lot of fungal stuff in that. It's a very important one. I would say that's probably my number one go-to. If you had to choose one inoculant, that'd be the one I choose, is the BioCoat Gold. The other two that I use with that, let me just check on this timer here. The other two that I use with that are Biogenesis, and I use Spectrum Extra right now. I'm running out of that, and I understand they replaced that with Spectrum DS. Either way, the Spectrum line from Advancing Eco-Agriculture, Biogenesis, BioCoat Gold, those three are my favorite inoculants. I pair all three of those together. It doesn't matter what crop I'm working with, put them in there. If there's a place for that soil or for that microbe to get a community, that's your best opportunity for it to get started and to maintain itself in the environment and to stay in the environment ideally. I always do use inoculants several times a year anyway. I just want to ensure that that's there because I recognize how important that biology is. One of my videos, I showed an area that I cover cropped. I didn't put down any nutritional supplements at all. All I put down was an inoculant, and you can see a massive difference in the greenness and the thickness and the health of the plants and the vibrance of the plants in that area versus the area that was not inoculated. It is really a tremendous difference, and I see it in the crops when I re-inoculate in the spring or early summer. You can see everything just So that's a really powerful one. The other thing I usually pair with that are a couple of biostimulants called PZ1000 and Micro 5000, and they're basically they help support enzyme function for those bacterial inoculants, as well as for some of the nutritional supplements that I use, so that we're making sure that all that trace mineral nutrition that we're putting there is actually available to the plants through the microbial community. That's very, very, very important. See, we're about 15 seconds out from the break here, or maybe 30. So Justin Gooder says also fungi adds CO2. Yes, it does, and that's important as well. And also the fungi. There's the break. So we'll catch it on the other side.
So why would I want to buy one of these, Mr. Radio Shack Manager?
Why would you want to buy one? Because now everybody's a chemical or veterinarian.
iTunes, TalkStream Live, and the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel. Tonight we're talking about cover crops and biology and rebuilding soils and remediating pesticides in soils to get back to organic soil health. And we talked a little bit about water and bacteria. Before the break, we were talking a little bit about mycology and biology in soil, especially as it relates to, well, we were starting to go into as it relates to compost here. So we'll go to that in a moment here. Geeky, thank you very much for sharing the Advancing Eco Agriculture website link there, much appreciated. They also have a YouTube channel, same Advancing Eco Agriculture, and I know I tend to pronounce that very fast, and I know I talk about advancing eco-agriculture a lot, but I've learned a tremendous amount of information from listening to John Kemp's webinars and talks, and I feel like he is probably one of the number one leading agronomist scientists today. And his company and his lab and many of the people he's working with have made tremendous bounds in soil health research and in developing products that support large-scale agricultural production in a regenerative fashion. And that's really important to me. As much as I love permaculture and small-scale stuff, I love the concept of more small farms and less big farms, and using community farms and connecting directly with your local farmers. The reality is the majority of our food chain comes from mass agriculture, and if you look at the geographical perspective of that, it's even scarier. I think I forget what the percentage was. I think it was like 75% of the vegetable produce that you have on your table today comes from 3 counties in Northern California. And you think about the implications of that, how fragile that system really is. Anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. We were talking about compost and biology and building soil health, and Justin Good Earth said fish hydrolysate really promotes fungi. Yes, it does. Justin, I would love to see you try Advancing Eco Agriculture's Sea Shield in with your crops. I think you'd find that to be really amazing. It's got crab and salmon and crab shell in it, so it's very high in chitin, and boy, it's really an amazing product. Anyway, I use that in the springtime and as sort of a nitrogen booster crop, but one of the advantages that it has is very high in calcium, and it's not just calcium, but it's bioavailable calcium, and it's a very powerful tool that I've used. It's probably just about the same pricing as the fish hydrosolate, and it's very much more targeted and very well formulated. Anyway, I don't know if you want to mess around with that, but I would love to see what your results are if you did that side by side with the fish hydrosolate. I'm probably not pronouncing that hydrosolate correctly. Anyway, let's see. So for those who don't know, Justin Good Earth is a cannabis grower and producer in Oregon, and he's saying I work with White Buffalo Seed Collective in BC, becoming West Coast distributor. Very cool. And Justin says Advancing Eco Agriculture website is best because the YouTube channel says very short videos. No, there's some long ones on there too. Most of the ones I watch are about an hour long. If you just go to the home page on the YouTube channel, it comes up with most of their short videos. I think that's so that when people first find it, they have something to look at that gets to their brain thinking, and kind of opens them up to check out some of the longer stuff. But if you click over to videos, you can go back through the webinars. Most of those are about an hour long, and there are some really excellent guests and discussions on there, and it'll open your mind to a whole nother level of information. I try to listen to those. I think they come out with about one a week, and that's like one of my top priorities of things I listen to YouTube wise. That goes high priority over everything else, because I always gain good, insightful information out of there, and a lot of the guests have excellent experience that helps draw excellent insight into past agricultural systems and where we can go in the future. Going back to the mycelium conversation, I just want to say there are two types of biological action in soil in general. There's actually way more than that, but we're going to focus on two types tonight: bacterial and fungal. And bacterial digestion is much more rapid. Typically, it's typically hours to days where bacterial in soil of organic material, and so it's very quick turnaround. It's very effective for, say, a green cover crop, like if you took and grew a buckwheat crop for 30 to 40 days, and as it started to come into flower, you mowed that and tilled it in. That would give you a quick release of nutrient. So you mow that, till it in, plant a new crop right into it. That bacterial release gives you that quick release of nutrient that gets that crop up and going fast. But the downside is it doesn't have that long-term storage capacity, and it doesn't build humic matter in the soil, that's back to that humans thing. And humans kind of act as sort of a bank account for nutrients. So I like to work with the fungal side of things as much as I can. That does not mean that the bacterial side doesn't have an important function, and that doesn't mean that those two communities don't interact with each other, because they most certainly do among other communities. Let's see. Justin Gooder says, I'll order it and try it my indoor as an experiment. Always down for new growth. Yeah, Sea Shield, Justin. Sea Shield, SEASHEILD, Sea Shield. And another one you might find very effective is Forage Foliar Feed. That's actually a blend of 4 different products of theirs that are all excellent products. Excellent for growing grasses, legumes, forage crops, that kind of stuff. And I actually tend to use it as a general nutrient for my foliar feeds and drenches, and then I'll add in other components if I feel, the life cycle of the plant I'm working with or the soil that I'm working with needs additional stuff. Welcome, Big Ed 1961. Welcome to the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube chat and live stream. So yeah, Sea Shield, excellent stuff. Yes, Geeky, that's it, Sea Shield. And yeah, Justin, don't be afraid to hit me up on MeWe and ask me for more information. I'm glad to share those products with you. The other one is Forage Foliar. Forage Foliar is a blend of C-Stim, Micropack, Photomag, and phosphorus PHT. So the phosphorus to help promote good roots and also good fruit and flower development. The C-Stim to help build immunity. That's made from a cold strain of seaweed. The Micropack is a range of magnesium, phosphorus, molybdenum, all those macro trace minerals, so to speak, the ones that are used in a little bit higher quantity than the actual trace minerals. It's the full spectrum of those that support good photosynthetic capacity and good biochemical sequence of nutrition in plants. As you see, if you're watching here on the YouTube channel, you see I have that biochemical sequence of nutrition down in the lower left-hand corner of your screen. That process is really critical for anything else to happen in plants and for anything else to happen from a photosynthetic standpoint. You really have to have all those base elements there. For those who are listening on TFR, TalkStream Live, or any of the other audio-only streams, I highly recommend you go and do a Google search, biochemical sequence of nutrition in plants. You'll see this image come up, and it explains how everything starts with boron and then goes to silica and then to calcium and on down this chain of events that has to happen in order for nutrients to be pulled into plants and used in an effective way for plant growth and for plant health. Let's see, and the other, C-Stim. So that's from a seaweed. Micropack, phosphorus PHTO, and Photomag is it's like manganese, boron, magnesium, molybdenum, and there's one or two others there. It's specifically targeted at increasing photosynthesis, and it's in the right ratio primarily for forage crops, so that when you spray it on, you get it's about a 3,000% increase in photosynthesis on the plant over and above whatever baseline, right? So those four in combination together in that blend called forage foliar feed is excellent. I use that on my sweet corn. I use that on my tomatoes. I use that on most of my plants, and I use it as a general feed here sometimes too. Now there's other stuff that you can use to target different specific things, but I find that's a great baseline one to work with. And it really gets to the core of most of the deficient minerals in the soil, at least here in my soils where I'm working. I'm on a really heavy clay soil here in Tivoli, New York, and so it takes a little bit of work to get those soils opened up and flocculating, and to start pulling some of the trace minerals that are locked up in those clay colloids. You really need to get that biology and soil active and going before you start to really unlock that process from the soil. But so I'm using combinations of biological drenches, cover cropping, mulching, foliar feeds, inoculants, all those things stacked together as a synergistic stack to make that whole process accelerate faster. Also in my clay soil here, I amend with something called gypsum. It's also known as calcium sulfate, and that helps change the magnesium calcium balance in these clay soils, and it breaks that clay soil up, and it opens that flocculation up, and it also provides available calcium for growing plants. That is very, very important part of growing plants. Every single cell in a plant has to have good calcium supply, and if it has to build those cell walls with something other than calcium, it's not going to be as strong and as durable against microbial and fungal infection and all that sort of thing. It's like if you're going to build a house, are you going to pour a concrete foundation, or are you just going to build it on dirt? Well, long term, that's going to show out for you. So I don't know. I hope I've answered all the questions so far here. I'm just going to go over and check on the TFR chat. And if you guys have other questions or other stuff you want to talk about, go ahead and ask them while I check in on the Truth Frequency Radio chat. Delete the Elite, hello and welcome. And Grave Digger 87, hello and welcome. All right. So it looks like nobody over there. I'm going to go back to the YouTube chat and see what's going on here. Big Ed 1961, glad you joined us, and thanks for coming over to the stream. So I went into a little bit about cover crops and that sort of stuff. I want to go a little deeper into that. I've been working on building my cover cropping systems to be more successive here. One of my biggest mistakes here in this farm for soil building and building soil health has been leaving ground not planted to something, not covered for a good portion of the year. A big part of that over the winter, when the weather is cold, it's really easy to think that, well, nothing I'm trying to grow really grows out there, so what's the point? But actually I'm finding that there's a lot of stuff that will grow out there, and it can provide multiple tremendous benefits to my operation and actually save me work and time. So I've been working with buckwheat for, 2 or 3 years now, on and off in various configurations, sort of testing with it and trying to learn it. What I found is that buckwheat is a great cover crop. It's great for honeybees. It's great for unlocking soils, especially for unlocking potassium and phosphorus in heavy clay soils. And it's an easy green manure crop. And it's fast. It's more of a warm weather crop, so like early spring planting's not so great. But once you start to get a little bit of warm weather and that soil warms up a little bit, you put buckwheat in, man, you can have a crop up and starting to grow within a week, and like have leaves covering the soil and preventing the weeds from taking advantage right off the bat. And in 30 to 40 days, when that crop is up and just starting to flower, you can wait for it to flower like I do with my bees. I let it flower. I let my bees come in and harvest the nectar and honey from it, and then you can mow it under and use it as a green manure crop, till it in and use that nutrition directly available from it. Or you can let it go to full flower and collect the seed from it, and now you have cover crop for next year. As far as harvesting goes by hand, it's a little tricky. I'm working on developing a better system. So far, my most successful means of harvesting seed from buckwheat has been using a blueberry rake, believe it or not. which I actually bought not for blueberries. I actually bought that back when I was growing larger amounts of chamomile, and I found that was a great way to harvest the chamomile. In fact, I read up on it somewhere, and somebody said that that was the ticket. And boy, were they right. That's an easy way to harvest chamomile. So that blueberry rake is very effective for chamomile and the buckwheat seed, and I'm sure for many of these other grain type plants you could use that same tactic. I don't have a big combine here, and I'm not on that scale. I wish I had a mini combine, but it's an expensive project and I don't have time to build it. Anyway, so this year I'm succeeding buckwheat. I've tried planting buckwheat and rye side by side in strips with some degree of success. Not great germination, but of course this year was a really dry year here up in upstate New York. We're in Tivoli, New York in zone 5B, and so that wasn't super effective. It seems to be growing, but not at a tremendous rate. So I've gone back and mowed under most of those areas now. I've rolled them down with a roller and then I mowed them under, and I've planted rye on top of them. I'm trying various methods: rye on top of a mulch, rye seeded in before I roll down the buckwheat between the sunflowers, and then there's rye that's been drilled in along with the Austrian Winter Pea directly into the soil. I expect really good results with the drilled in stuff. I'm waiting to see what the results are on the other stuff, but either way, the rye and the Austrian Winter Pea should provide a nice mat in the spring and plenty of nitrogen fixation throughout the winter, as well as building that soil structure up, and that helps open up this heavy, tight clay soil that we have here. So I'm just going to go back to the YouTube chat here quick and see if anybody has any questions or comments or thoughts. What do you do with all that dried corn? Which dried corn? You mean like the older videos there with the blue flour corn? I was making corn flour with it and making cornbread with it. And if you've never had cornbread from high nutrition, organically grown Hopi blue flour corn, man, it's a world of difference. It's got a really nice, fresh, nutty flavor to it. It's just amazing stuff. My goal initially was to develop basically to produce my own seed. I did do that, and then I had some mold issues in one of the apartments that I was in, and so I lost a lot of that seed to that, and I tried to grow that again last year, and none of it germinated. I'm going to do a germination test with the last remaining jar of stock I have this year over the winter, actually, just to see if it'll germinate, and if it will, I'm going to plant it again next year. My goal basically is to size the corn up bigger, grow a bigger, healthier, and more nutrient-dense crop, and from that develop more nutrient-dense seed. And for those who don't know, nutrient density in seed is a tremendous factor in how well that seed germinates and how well that gene can express itself as far as yield and quality in the following life cycle from that seed. After the break, I actually want to come back to seed quality a little bit. I'm going to talk about it a little bit tonight and kind of go into some of the eccentricities and some of the details of it. But at some point, when things slow down for Brad of Grow the Farm Up, and when things slow down for me over the winter, Brad's going to come on and we're going to have a talk about seed. And I can't wait to unleash that guy's knowledge about seed. As much as I know about seed, I'm sure it's thousands of times more. He's a commercial seed breeder out in Nebraska, and that's what he does: organic, high nutrient dense seed. And he's developed a whole market around it. And he's one of the few remaining independent seed producers who has their own independent seed facility, and basically can choose the market they want to serve to. And the demand is way higher than he can supply. So he basically has an endless market. As much as he can grow, he can't keep up. So that's an awesome position to be in a business, in any business, and especially in the farming business, which is a very tough business to stay afloat in, and to stay dynamic in, and to stay profitable and productive in. So that's what I do with the blue corn. I eat it. I make corn flour with it, and I eat it. And I made Indian pudding with it once. That was absolutely delicious. And I save the seed and I grow it out the next year. And I want to eventually make tortillas. And I'd love to at some point make peaky bread, although that's a little bit more of a complicated process. But I really like the culture and the spirit behind peaky bread. If you haven't seen, there's a video on YouTube of how the Hopi actually make peaky bread, the whole process they go through, and it's really fascinating. It's cool to connect to that Hopi blue flour corn's culture, that's sort of embedded deep in that seed over generations, thousands of years. Then YTFP Chris says, I sure wish I could grow. Getting medical down here is so expensive and hard to find decent CBD. Yeah, I hear you, YT. I'm drinking this CBD green tea here to kind of help my chest heal up. For those who don't know, I injured myself, and just kind of take away some of the pain and help facilitate that healing process. And these things are $5 a piece. It's like I really would like to put 3 or 4 of these down a day, and I just can't swing that. And if I could just grow my own medicine, boy, wouldn't that be nice. I was just thinking to myself last night. I went out to the greenhouse to grab some holy basil and some lemon verbena and some comfrey and some ginger and some turmeric and make a tea. And I'm walking back and thinking, wow, it's so nice to be able to go out to the greenhouse, pick whatever medicine I need, bring it back, and it's just here on site when I need it. One moment here. Had to clear my throat there. I didn't want to blow your eardrums out. Geeka says you could set up an indoor lab. Yeah, you could, but you still have the legal risk there. Anyway, let's make killer polenta. YTFP says, sounds good for him. Must make killer polenta too. I'm not familiar with what polenta is, YTFP. Will do, Justin, will do. We'll definitely contact you regarding the CBD. That's it's interesting here in New York. This is a very non-progressive state regarding cannabis, THC, CBD, and plant medicines in general. And so they legalized like 2 or 3 years ago for CBD use. Initially, it was for CBD use for vapes and for internal, like in teas, drinks, internal, and creams. But they wouldn't legalize actual cannabis with THC in it. And for those of you who know about the deeper research on it, the THC is a critical component in facilitating the total efficacy of CBD, and it's been shown to improve the efficacy of CBD. So it's actually a critical and important part of it. It's really frustrating that we can't grow our own here in New York. The only way you can even grow CBD is by growing hemp here, and you have to get a special permit from the state. And I understand the application for that is relatively expensive, and there's a whole, process that you got to go through. So while I live in a state that has legalized the production of some medicinal components of cannabis or hemp, I'm still in a state where I can be shot and or arrested for possessing a small amount of cannabis. It's a really weird environment. And it's even weirder that like half of our country, I think it's like 25 states have legalized cannabis on some level, right? So like half the country is legalized on it. At least 80% of the population by vote thinks we should legalize it, and yet we're still not. And if we look at why that is, go back and follow the money, see what the companies are behind it and what their patents are. Look at Marlboro or Philip Morris, for example, how long they've actually been studying this and how much they've invested in massive facilities to be big producers of it. kind of frustrating that the same companies that have been, selling nicotine products and making people sick for all this time are now, doing what they're doing. Anyway, after the break, we're going to go back to seed quality. For now, we're headed to the break. Network YouTube channel. If you haven't been listening before, you should go back and listen. You missed some really good discussion about soil health, soil biology, water, rain development, and down the list, including pesticide remediation. And we even touched a little bit on cannabis, CBD, and THC and how those interact. So let's see, and I just want to finish up this discussion on that because YTFP says terpenes is where the medicine is as well. Some studies with that and cancer, not just hippie hype. Yes, absolutely, and actually I've done some studying into specific terpenes. Ones like myrcene and limonene and pinene have some very specific and very pronounced effects for pain management, among many other things regarding human health. So yeah, it's that, again, it's biology, it's diverse systems, it's synergistic stacks. You don't just want one isolated compound from a plant. That's where pharmacology comes from. You want the entire range of compounds from the medicinal plants, and in that range of compounds you have both the productive compound and the counter to negative compounds in many of these plants. Without going into tremendous depth on that, there's plenty of science to support that, and I recommend you go look into it more, or come and join our Truth Frequency radio stream here on Comrades and Farms and ask questions about it or bring it up in discussion. We're more than happy to discuss all sorts of stuff like that. So I want to get back to seed quality. In this last half hour, I want to talk a little bit about some of the eccentricities of seed quality. I'm not super well versed in this, but I know enough to get myself in trouble, so I'm going to go ahead and do that, I think. All right, so seed quality comes back to the environment that the plant that seed was produced from was grown in. Higher health that plant can be in, and if we refer back to the plant health pyramid, ideally we'd like to be level 4 in the plant health pyramid. If you're not familiar with that, go back and listen to last week's live stream. We talked very specifically about the plant health pyramid and how to, and at least some of the general concepts of how to achieve reaching level 4 in the plant health pyramid, and that's not an easy thing to do. It's a long-term thing, but when you get there, you get some tremendous benefits. Many of the pests and diseases that would ordinarily attack plants and cause problems, and you would then need to spray pesticides and poisons on to kill, instead are repelled by the plant's own plant secondary metabolites. And some of those plant secondary metabolites are terpenes and flavonoids and many other compounds like that, like Chris and I were just talking about. So whether you're growing a tomato or a sunflower or a grain crop or cannabis or hemp, no matter what plant you're growing, if you can get that plant's health up higher, you produce a lot more of those compounds, those terpenes and those plant secondary metabolites. And those compounds are the basis for many of the plant medicinal oils that we use, including the essential oils that people like to get. They use the extracted versions of those for medicine. They use them for aromatherapy, all that sort of stuff. All of those come from plant secondary metabolites, and that comes from truly highly plant health. So for a long time, there's been a lot of study regarding producing medicinal oils like mint or even like a cannabis resin like Rick Simpson oil, something like that. And people have done studies about stressing plants to get them to respond with these oils. But what we find is on the other side of the spectrum, if you get a plant's health up really high, it'll produce even more of those compounds, and it'll produce a wider range and spectrum of those type of compounds. So it's interesting that you can stress the plant to get it to react that way, but you can get a lot more results by improving the plant's health. Interesting, a lot like humans and animals. So I have a comment here from YTFP Chris. Sadly, a lot of what we said was not entirely true. The declaration being on hemp paper, for one, but it got people's attention. I think the draft of it was, though. Yes, it was, and actually YTFP, while we're on the topic, I really hadn't planned to go off into hemp and cannabis tonight, but while we're on the topic, my understanding is back in the day, you had to have, like if you owned a farm, you had to have 40 acres of hemp in production. It was used for flags, it was used for outfitting ships with ropes, for mooring and sails and all that sort of stuff, and I think even a lot of the sails were made out of hemp. So very important material, and it was only in part when they started competing with the oil industry and the paper industry, that we ended up sort of eliminating hemp from the system. And it's sad because the hemp has the capability to provide both commercial oils, plant medicines, and fiber for paper, as well as for ropes and clothes and many other things. That plant could solve a huge portion of our total systemic planet problems regarding energy and materials and plastics and fossil fuels. So yeah, definitely a lot of potential there. Let's see, YTFP Chris says, you did a similar thing with your sunflowers, that resin, right, Farm? Or are they just naturally doing that? Yes, I did. I used a foliar feed system on those as well to improve their health. Tremendously more resin, so much so that you can actually go up and run your finger in the resin, and you can actually taste and smell sunflower resin just like you would taste and smell like a THC resin off of a cannabis plant. It's sticky just like that, except instead of smelling like a skunk or like a cannabis plant, it smells like sunflower. It's really amazing stuff. At some point I want to grow a lot more of those and experiment with harvesting, see what it can do for human health, or get some sort of studying or testing done. And I also want to go back and read up more on the medicinal benefits of sunflowers. I'm sure there are many, and I just haven't, it's another area of topic or another subject I haven't researched deep into. But yes, I've done that over time. I'm constantly trying to maintain plant health and soil health at its highest ability. And in the scope of that, a big part of the reason for that is to improve the seed quality, to get a higher balanced level of manganese and phosphorus and zinc and copper and boron and all of these pieces that need to be present in a seed to make a seed more viable and to make it bust out of germination and grow healthily and strongly right from the start. And you know, when we think about seeds, we think about this inert little ball of a seed, right? But think about this. Most of the seeds, all of the seeds that we plant, they'll sit there in that inert state until we put them in an environment where they'll grow. That means that they're constantly actually sensing their environment. They're actually paying attention to the environment. And when the environment suddenly becomes favorable for that seed to grow, that's when it germinates and grows. I think that's really an amazing concept to think about, and maybe it'll change your perspective on seeds and how you look at seeds, because it's really easy to look at a seed and think it's just an inert seed. But man, anybody who's grown a garden or grown a farm and has had weed pressure problems knows you go through and you till and you wipe out this weed set, and guess what? A whole bunch more of those weeds come up. You know why? Because you've disturbed them up out of the soil, and the condition is right. They're close enough to the light, or they have enough moisture, or they're at the right depth, and they germinate and they start growing. And now you have a whole new weed competition problem. And it's just a little subtlety I want people to think about when you're thinking about seeds. Let's see. See, YTFP Chris says, watch the movie Hemp for Victory. Yes, was part of the war effort. Yes, exactly. And Justin Goodearth says, what do you use for IPM, or integrated pest management? Yeah, that is a massive question. Again, I try to, my big focus is biology and nutrition. And if I can't make a plant healthy enough to outperform the pest or disease pressure, then that plant doesn't survive in my environment. And while that may seem really harsh, all I'm really doing is studying and mimicking nature in that concept. And so that makes me strive really hard to try and get my plant health up as much as I can. So a big part of that is those inoculants. I like to make sure those inoculants are in and on the seed, and in and on the leaf surface, and in and on that soil as much as I possibly can. And when I do that, that biology displaces bad biology. That's a big part of it, you know. A lot of these diseases that attack plants because there's no good biology protecting them. There's a video on YouTube here somewhere, I think it's Gaston Nasson's. He's talking about he's talking about specifically the somatoscope, which is a form of dark field microscopy on living blood culture. And he also talks about microbes and stuff, and he talks about specifically gut health. And there's actually a video camera scene in this video where he goes down into the human gut, and he shows how if you have like an ulcer or a scar inside the gut, and there's no good biology in there to protect it, the bad biology can get in there, and then that's when infection gets started, and that infection kind of takes over and starts eating flesh, right? But if you inoculate with, say, the lactobacillus, that lactobacillus comes in and displaces the bad biology, and now that bad biology is overgrown with good biology. And so that's a big concept when it comes to regenerative agriculture, not to be thinking of the mentality that where the chemical farmers come from, where they're always trying to identify a specific pest or bacteria or fungus and attack it with some sort of method of killing it, because it's really ultimately that ends up not being effective. Long term, you end up killing all sorts of other stuff around it, and in doing so, now you've disrupted the ecology of the entire environment, and so now you have that much more to get balance back to correct the problem. So my big concept for IPM is good biology in and on the seed and soil, and then back that with good trace mineral nutrition. That's part of why I do the plant sap analysis test. I'm trying to see how close is my plant nutrition to where I think it is. And despite the fact that test was really expensive, I learned a tremendous amount about my soils and about my management practices in doing that. And I wish I could afford to do that every 2 weeks throughout the year, but I'm not at that scale right now. It's quite expensive. But let's see. Let me go back to Geek Gardens here. But because it can also affect your brain, it's an evil weed. Not to mention its effect on the alcohol industry. Oh yes, we're still talking about cannabis in the chat over here, I guess. So the seed nutrition, yeah, it comes down to, most of the seed that's on the market today is harvested early in an attempt to pack more seed in and on a pallet, in an attempt to get it out of the field and process faster, get it to market, all that sort of thing. There's very little focus on seed quality, except for some niche markets like Brad over at Grow the Farm Up is actually very focused on nutrient density and the quality of that seed. And I can't wait to hear him talk about the seed quality testing that he does. Because I don't, on my scale, I don't have access to the budget or the facilities to do that sort of testing here to really ensure that my seed quality is good. But I will say that I can notice a tremendous difference. The Hopi Blue Corn, back when I first acquired that, I bought an organic version and an inorganic version of that seed corn from the same company, the same producer, and I took those two corn seeds and I did a side-by-side grow test with them, both of them in organic and in high nutrition with foliar feeds, inoculants, biology, and in fact I even planted that no-till, and I found excuse me, I had to clear my throat. I found that there was a tremendous difference in seed size between the organic seed that I started from and the inorganic seed. The seed size was almost double, and somewhere here on my YouTube channel we're close to 1,000 videos. I think the last I looked were like 940 videos, but somewhere amongst those, if you go back and look up blue corn seed quality or something like that, you'll find that comparison, and you'll see the difference in yield was tremendous, and the difference in seed size was tremendous, and that was just based on whether the seed that I bought was grown organically or grown in a chemical fertilizer system. So that's just a short-term comparison, and it proved to me that everything that I'd been learning from the Bionutrient Food Organization and from John Kempf and from many of these other people was accurate, true, and correct information, and that kind of spawned me forward to keep seeking to learn and keep moving forward. So seed quality comes down to what you're trying to do is get all those trace minerals to end up in the seed at the end of the day. And there was a video from Advanced Eco Agriculture, and let me just pull it up because I can't remember the title off the top of my head. but it was an excellent video, and he talked at the end of that video. Oh, it was wheat production. It was about wheat production, but he talked specifically. I've talked about this several times on my channel, and several times, I think even in Comrades and Farms, how there's this balance between cytokines and auxins in plants, and how those two hormones within the plant antagonize each other, and how they affect root and shoot growth, and how in using pruning you can tip that balance in favor of roots or shoots. And you can sort of use this to manipulate plant growth and plant health. And this talk was about unlocking the potential yield and profit of wheat growing with AEA's David Miller. And right at the end of that talk, about 37 minutes, in fact, I'll drop that link in here into the YouTube chat. But at the end of that talk, at about the 37-minute mark, he talks specifically about how those auxins in the plant actually affect how they end up in the seed, and they affect how the seed pulls nutrition from the plant into the seed for that final capture where it's sequestering those nutrients. The reason this is important is because all of these nutrients need to be available. If we go back and look at the biochemical sequence of nutrition in plants here, and we see everything starts with boron, and then goes to silica, and then goes to calcium, which binds with nitrogen to form amino acids, and we carry on down this chain. All of those nutrients need to be available for that seed to germinate, sprout, and start growing. You have to remember, a seed is an embryo that has no way of collecting energy until it gets a root in the ground and connects to the soil and the biology in that soil, and a leaf set above ground to start capturing photosynthetic energy and providing its own energy. Until that point, it absolutely has to come up from the seed. The seed has to supply all the nutrition, all the sugar, all the trace minerals, all those micronutrients, all have to be inside of that seed and available and ready to go. And so that seed puts out a tremendous amount of energy to get started before it ever plugs into sunlight and soil. And so that's why seed quality is so important. If it doesn't have all those pieces, how can it get started? So that's why I emphasize and stress on seed quality. And if you look around and you start playing around with different seed sources and testing different seed qualities against each other, you'll actually start to you'll be able to notice those differences visually to your eyes. If you grow side by side an inorganic seed and a well-grown organically produced seed, I should specify that, because there's lots of organically grown stuff that is just slap a label on it and it's organic. And we talked about that a little bit earlier in this episode when Cecilia Jansen was asking about getting the organic certification for her friend's farm there. And I said, all you got to do is not spray chemicals there for 3 years. That's a pretty low standard, and ultimately the organic system doesn't do testing to confirm that quality is there. All it says is that you can only apply this range of fertilizers. You can't use this, and actually in organics you can actually use certain pesticides, although they are less of an endocrine disruptor. They are still, at the end of the day, many of them are endocrine disruptors, and so they are having a negative effect on the hormonal system. Certainly they are better than some of the long-term chemical pesticides, but if we can avoid that, that's better. And that's what comes back to the regenerative agriculture and building disease-suppressive soils and improving plant health. Because if we can do that, we can get rid of the pesticide concept altogether, let the plants defend themselves, and build the soil health, and the soil health builds the plant health, builds our health. Because we have to remember that 30% of our RNA, that's the replication part of our DNA process. When we replicate DNA, it goes through RNA and then back to DNA. 30% of the food that we eat interacts directly with the RNA. And so the food that we eat has tremendous ability to improve our health or decrease our health, depending on the food quality that we're getting and whether or not there are chemicals and pesticides in it, whether or not it has a full complete spectrum of trace mineral nutrition, whether or not it has all the vital amino acids, down the list of enzymatic function, trace mineral nutrition, biology, all that sort of stuff. So let me just go back and read in the chat here. Justin Gooder says, you always tell me what I want to hear. Well, I'll try not to be a yes man, but I'm glad you're liking what you're hearing, Justin. Thank you. And Geeky says, you beat me to it. Oh, yeah, I beat him to it on the link for a change. He usually beats me to it. Geeky, thanks again for the great mod work and sharing links and stuff. I really appreciate the support and the backup. Very helpful. Let's see, Justin Gooder says, gnarly barley tea. That is why I sprout teas are awesome as well. Unlock all that goodness. Yes, and also excellent if you're feeding chickens. That's another part of the regenerative agricultural program I want to get back to. I want to get some grains and sprout those grains and start supplementing those in place of this chicken feed. I don't like this buying a bag of chicken feed and just feeding it to the chickens. It's easy, but it's not a system that I can develop locally and long term. Ultimately, what I want to do is grow the grains that I feed my chickens with here, sprout those grains, and they give you like 5 to 10 times more nutrition than just as a seed form. And there are many different pieces to the reasons behind that. One of them is the phytic acid that's on the outside of most seeds. That's to help inhibit early germination of a seed. And that acts as an anti-nutrient in the system, so it actually has a negative value for the nutrients of some of the seeds we're eating. That's why many of these seeds, grains, and nuts should be soaked or sprouted or fermented in order to unlock the nutrition that's in them. Again, it comes back to that biology being that facilitator between processes, sort of like an exchange between. YTFP says, yes, sprouted grains making their way into health food shops the last 10 years or so. Sprouted breads and things. Yes, and that's critically important and makes a huge difference. And it's sad that most of our systems don't even look at that model or understand it. But fortunately, the consciousness is coming around, awareness is coming around, and people are learning and starting to pay more attention to it. And yeah, Geeky Gardens has an excellent point. Sprouts don't take up much room either. One of the best sprouts you can do is a brassica sprout. Whether it's a broccoli or a cauliflower or a cabbage or anything in the brassica family, just to sprout those and eat those are very high in sulforaphane. I highly recommend you check out Dr. Rhonda Patrick on sulforaphane and how that affects the NRF2 pathway. That's one of our replication DNA pathways, and tremendous benefits for human health. So again, it goes back to, some very subtle changes make massive differences in health and nutrition, and all it takes is a little bit of biology, a little bit of the right water at the right point. Wow, are we already to the break here? No, I don't know. The noise, I had a static noise there and it dropped out. I hope I didn't get disconnected here. Looks like I'm still live. Are you guys still able to hear me? Something weird happened with my audio. I had the massive static rain noise, and now I don't seem to see it here. Anyway, I hope you're still able to hear me. And the stream is still going okay. Yeah, 2 minutes left here for the show. Wow, amazing how fast 2 hours go. I just feel like, what am I going to talk about for 2 hours? And then, poof, 2 hours is gone, and it's like, wow, what did I talk about? Anyway, had sprouts today and lots of kimchi from YTFP Chris. And he also says, man, this is the best episode yet. So action-packed and informative and went really smooth. Thanks, YT. I'm trying to get my streaming tactics and methods down. I'm trying to improve the production quality and trying to have less ahs and ums in my talking, and try to bring good content to you guys. So much information that I have in my head, it's so hard to organize it and portray it in a way that's digestible to people. Perhaps I should add some biology to it. Geeky says, I agree, guys. He's getting comfortable. Yeah, I am starting to get comfortable. And I'm starting to get more used to 2-hour live streams. My max usually was an hour before, and so 2 felt kind of long, but I'm starting to wear into it. So it feels good. Thank you guys for your support. Your interaction support is really helpful. I did a few streams a while back where there wasn't really anyone listening, and boy, it's hard to just talk out and feel like you're just talking to yourself. So I really appreciate your interaction and your support. It means a lot to me, and I look forward to next week's discussion. It's going to be another good one. I'll try and get a few more good videos up this week. I know I have one coming up on cover crops, on the areas that I've cover cropped. I'm going to go into what I cover cropped them with, how many square feet they are, just kind of show off a little bit on cover cropping, just because I'm so excited about it. And that is about the end of the show. Thanks to everyone who is listening here on Truth Frequency Radio, iHeart, iTunes, TalkStream Live, and the Farmacy Seeds Network. I hope you'll join us next week, or maybe if you want to come and check out the Sunday night All Things Natural Net, that's an amateur radio net provided on the Farmacy Seeds Network YouTube channel. Please come check it out. That's all. Thanks to Truth Frequency Radio. Thanks to my friends and subscribers for joining and participating. We'll see you guys next week.
Radio is your #1 source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature cutting-edge programs like
Bye.